Namaste. One of the common sights with which many of us who came to Pondicherry in the 80s, 90s, even 2000 up to 2010, with which we were familiar was if you went to Ganesh temple, I haven't stepped inside, but if you walked that way, you would see this elephant, she elephant, Lakshmi, huge, quite a formidable creature, standing there, and she would take some whatever people offered, and in return she would bless with her trunk. And every time I passed by, I wondered. I knew the answer, but I marveled more than wondered that look at her, she is one doing something which is not a natural instinct or natural habitat. Second, she is apparently enslaved to a creature who is far less in terms of strength, which is man, and she is just obeying man. And of course, every time I marveled at her, I also marveled at the way human nature operates and how we become tied to a certain, in a certain sense, everything in creation is habit, not just human beings, but to patterns of movements. Nature is movement, but nature moves in certain patterns along certain grooves, and thereby it binds us to move along those groups. It's like when you spin something in space, it follows its own course. Unless something greater deflects it, changes its course, alters its route. So, this is the basic principle of habit formation. Now, this is required. This is required because that's how the balance of nature is created. Creation is very diverse with all kinds of objects, all kinds of creatures, and there has to be some way that they remain constrained or limited to whatever they are meant to serve. Some purpose they serve in the grand plan. So one has to look at habits as patterns of nature. The first thing that we look at habit is patterns of nature. Who create these patterns? Nature creates these patterns. So why does nature create this pattern? How can nature create this pattern? So because nature is a conscious force. So she creates pattern. And this pattern, she can create large variety of patterns. There is a very nice beautiful line in Savitri, in Sri Aurobindo's poem, who the hand that sent Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a cull. So even where the patterns seem to break and join, even that is a pattern. So ordinarily, everything in creation is bound by certain patterns, but nature always has a certain key, like a loophole. It deliberately leaves a loophole. Even there is a purpose. Just as we use the word waste, but there is nothing called waste in nature. Everything is used. Every cell of body, every aspect, even what we call as waste, is used by nature in a sum total of possibilities for something else. So it leaves a little loophole. And that loophole is called asymmetry. So, it creates symmetry. At the same time, it creates a little bit of asymmetry somewhere, some possibilities there. Now, why does it do it? Because it is through that door that evolution takes place. So, both things we see in nature, fixed patterns, fixed grooves, at the same time, it shows us a way out of this fixed group. And that way, interestingly, is not operating at the same level, but evolving through some door which brings in a kind of temporary asymmetry in the working of nature within us. We'll talk about it at length, maybe in the last one, how to use that, what is that asymmetry element within us, how we can use it for our evolutionary purposes. But first step is that nature binds all material phenomena in the material universe by sheer pattern which become habits. And the beauty of these habits is it's a very delicate balance of forces through which it creates habits. So even habit, if you try to stray away from it, your own existence is threatened. So it preserves. That's why in Indian thought, Brahma creates, but the moment he creates, everything has to be sorted out and placed in certain rhythm, certain order, certain pattern. So that rhythm, that pattern which keeps everything interconnected in its own place, preserves it in that place, is attributed to the Lord Vishnu. And he does it on the basis of dharma. Dharma originally means, one of the meaning of dharma is that which holds creation in a very fine, delicate, beautiful balance. But then there is the third deity, Shiva. So what Shiva does, Shiva breaks the patterns. He breaks the habits, he breaks the tendencies, he breaks the fixed. He can break the entire material creation, so it seems, by his dance. So we have these three forces simultaneously acting in creation. One is things which are new, which want to come, but immediately they have a tendency to crystallize into fixed patterns, because that's how creation is preserved. It has its own place. And then the third power which breaks these tendencies and patterns for something to allow something new to emerge. This is the fundamental thing going on in the entire creation, the entire material universe. But while material universe is completely bound by these patterns, more or less completely bound, in life creations, we see some degree of freedom beginning to emerge. So there is a tendency for learning and adaptation by learning. So that's what was the example of Lakshmi, the elephant, that while she is a creature of the wild, she has been trained and taught, and she has learned to stay where she is. And if you see, when I used to see this, I went into how they train elephants, because I used to wonder how, I had heard that the Mahavat sits and he puts a little rod and the elephant, but it's not as easy as that. So I realized that in the beginning, when they train an elephant, they tie the leg to a thick iron chain to a very strong iron, some rod which is stuck to the ground deep enough. And then the elephant is, through reward and punishment, trained to stay at its place. Then as the training proceeds, they open the chain. But the thing is, elephant stays where it is. It is now learned a behavior. So as animals come, that means we can retrain ourselves. There is a possibility in life to retrain, to entrain, to completely, change a pattern and begin with a new pattern. Of course, it will still operate in pattern, but it can break the original initial pattern and a new pattern can be created. So people who say that behavior cannot change must understand that, well, we see all the time this behavior cannot change is not true. But when we talk about training, it's largely a mechanical process. There is no inner change, but there is a mechanical process that takes place through which behavior can be changed. We see it in zoo. The tigers, the lions sitting, all along, 7, 8, 9 lions, and there is a lion master, ring master, who trains them and they don't eat. Very interestingly, they don't do it with tigers. I have not seen in a zoo. Because there are certain things which can be trained, certain things cannot be trained. Tigers are very, they combine the strength of a lion, possibly a little stronger, with the cunning of a cat. So very difficult to train those fellows. They immediately know. They get the wind of it and they know how to do things. So this is how in life these patterns emerge. They can be retrained. This is a capacity given to man. And at third level, to all living creatures. We see how crows do it. I just heard about crows, how they can completely using their intelligence bring new things into existence. So crows have crow committees. It's not a joke. I had once seen a picture of many crows sitting together and I had clicked a photograph and I jokingly had posted that crows in a meeting, because I always felt that conferences and meetings are like, crows are sitting and discussing things. So but then within 3-4 days, I got a very interesting, naturally crows must have taken a bit of either an offense, or they must have been very happy that yes, we are as intelligent as human beings to meet. And I learned that crows actually do conduct meetings, and if a human being has been very nasty towards one crow, he'll go and communicate to the entire crow community. And they actually haunt you. Whereas if you have been very kind to them, they even can give you reward. They'll bring things and give you. So this was something like a new learning. So this whole idea of learning, relearning, breaking from the old learning is a very, very much, phenomena that emerges with life, which of course we inhabit all these and we inherit the material nature's complete bondage to habit, we also inherit life's capacity to adapt by new learning. That's how all evolution has proceeded. If there was no new learning possible in life, there would be no evolution at all. But then added to it comes mind. With man, there is a little more freedom. So we see that the journey is from bondage towards a greater freedom. Now, mind's capacity is phenomenal. Actually, we hardly explore it because we are, again, here there is the physical mind which tells us this cannot be done. So again, something which, physical mind is the mind which is very much connected with the material universe. So it is, physical mind is that which receives data through the senses and is bound by a certain pattern of habit which is purely related to the physical mind. So, but mind is meant to soar beyond. So mind, out of physical mind and the data of a very mechanical universe, it begins to imagine. Now in imagination you can do anything. So people often say you can imagine these things, but it's not possible. But that's not true. Imagination is the first impulse to escape from the fixity of the physical mind, by which it fixes things in a certain way. They move in a certain way. And this physical mind is again not just in man, even in matter it operates as the material mind. That's what builds forms which are fixed in creation. So this physical mind has this capacity to bind things to a groove, and it gives us this belief that things can be done only this way and no other way. But then the imaginative mind comes and breaks it, says at least in imagination I can do my way. And then comes rational mind, it says, okay, you are climbing too high, so clip the wings. This is possible, this much is possible, this much is not possible. But this is the ordinary range of the human mind. But the human mind has operations of which we are not even aware. And once we tap into that, then nothing is really impossible. So, for example, people who, I'll give 2-3 examples of how things can change. So, one is, there was a study which was conducted, or even before that, hypnotic phenomena. So, those of us who are conversant with hypnotic phenomena, I have kind of been trained in it, but I don't like to do hypnosis because hypnosis is putting somebody else under your will. It should never be done. So nobody has a right to, will is too sacred a thing to be ever taken. Nothing should be put under anybody's influence except the divine. But as part of the psychiatric training, so I'm aware of how hypnosis works. But the beauty of hypnosis, you can actually make the person do certain things which he would not ordinarily do. For instance, lift the hand. Now, usually after some time you'll feel tired. You will want to, keep it down. But in a hypnotic state, even in certain states of catatonia, catalepsy, you can maintain a posture for hours. It's just not imaginable how you are doing it. And it's just based on the power of suggestion. It can be done, therefore the mind suggests and the body obeys. So ordinarily in human beings, it is the body which governs, body consciousness. But as we evolve, the sign of an evolving humanity is that the body does not govern us, but the mind and the vital govern the body. Even ordinarily, the human body, when driven by the vital, can do things which ordinarily seem very abnormal. People have kept awake, even youngsters nowadays, I don't know how they manage it. They sleep at 2 o'clock and wake up at 8 and they go about. Now, this is not something which I can imagine. At our age, we never did this. But how? Because largely it is the vital overdrive for various reasons. Sometimes just by the power of the mind, pressure of the mind, too many meetings, and your mind can do it. Beyond it, there is a still greater consciousness which can completely overpower the mind and reset the whole balance. I'm aware of, recently I was reading, it was a marvel. I'm mentioning this as an instance, not as a political thing. But I was just listening to our finance minister, Jay Shankar's one small little clipping. And he said, we went in 5 days to 5 countries. And we had some, in almost 36 hours total, 23 meetings at one point of time. And they were just resting at night, flying at night, and then in the morning, the moment. And he says, when we got down after a long, hectic trip, where they were traveling by night and meeting in the morning. And when they came back to India, they had 23 meetings lined up within the next 36 hours. It was just amazing. Now, how could one do it? Ordinarily, if I have to think and plan and do it, I would say, no, no, it is too much. So, this mind which fixes the limits can actually undo the limits. This capacity is there in human beings. But of course, this is not to say that we should keep trying all kinds of things, but there is a possibility of higher and higher consciousness to be able to do it. So basically, when we see the evolutionary journey, it operates at several levels, but we see at the lowest level, consciousness is completely lost and bound by the form. Whatever pattern has been created by the material mind, physical mind, it just obeys it blindly, mechanically. So you'll see a whole set of humanity which blindly follows. It just believes that this has happened, this is how it is going to happen. But as we evolve, there is a certain degree of freedom which follows the steps of evolution. So when we look at things in this way, I was talking of another example, how the mind can operate and change things, even at the most material level. So this is a well documented study. So ordinarily, when people have this malignancies or certain autoimmune disorders, you give immunosuppressants. One of the things, not so much for certain types of malignancy, but more for autoimmune disorders, you give this. You want the immune system to work at a little lower level. Otherwise, there's a problem. The body's immune system is destroying itself. So, they gave this particular drug to one group, which was methotrexate, which is known to depress the immune system. And to another group, they gave just saccharin. Now we don't have saccharin, but it used to be used earlier as artificial sweetener. Now we have other artificial sweeteners, none of which is good. Probably a little dose of sugar may be less harmful than taking them. But anyways, they took this saccharin, but they were told that this is the original drug, and this is going to suppress your immune system and you'll get well. And the interesting part was that they actually had the suppression of the immune system. Now, it's not just that their pain vanished or by the placebo effect. Even the very cells of the body were responding to this strong suggestion. And I remember one place where mother said about cancer, Sri Aurobindo passingly mentions that cancer can be cured by suggestion. They never regarded cancer as such a serious thing as we have made it out to be. But there were other things which are far more serious and painstaking from a yogic point of view. To cure a skin disease, to cure a simple thing like toothache is far more serious, because these organs are impervious. And yet we realize that in everyday practice this doesn't happen. Why? Again, because mind, thought is tied up in a way of thinking. So habits are not just physical things. Normally we think habits means, it's like certain characterological things. People drink, so it's a habit. People smoke, it's a habit. Well, everything is a habit. Is eating a habit? Yes. We can debate whether it's good or bad. Is drinking water a habit? Yes. But this habit is keeping a certain balance in this creation. This habit is helping us to survive. If the habit of drinking water is lost, as happens in certain conditions, people get dehydrated without realizing that they are getting dehydrated, because they are not able to experience thirst. That is one of the problems with air conditioned and other things. It takes away their normal patterns by which we tend to feel thirsty and drink water. So everything in a sense is a habit. There are habits of the physical. Now if we try to categorize them, habits which are purely related to the physical body, and these habits are inbuilt by nature, and there are a means of preserving the individual. So they are not bad or good, they are helpful to preserve things. But because the life can introduce new things, it often breaks this pattern and introduces new things, which is actually very often worse. And mother gives this interesting example that in an animal, you make a monkey try to drink alcohol, and they actually did this experiment. So he tasted. He didn't know it is alcohol. So he tasted it, and after that, when the next time it was, they tried to pour, he picked the glass and threw it at the fellow who had actually poured. But with human beings, it doesn't work like that. Very often, people become slave. They can form new habits, and that's where we realize the danger of habits that comes in. Nature forms habits only to preserve a species within certain limits. The problem of habits, as far as nature is concerned and the physical body is concerned, it also limits us. But this limitation in ordinary life, ordinary circumstances, is though it is counter evolutionary, it is helpful to keep us within limits. So habitually we go to sleep, habitually we wake up. If everything we had to plan, heartbeats are driven by habit, breathing is a habit. Everything actually, if you see, including, if we see, they are all built by rhythms and patterns. Even disease and health. So in astrology, they actually see it, and I have seen myself that there are phases in life when you are so prone to diseases. You try to control one, another comes. You try to control the second, third one comes, like a pattern. And then there are phases when suddenly everything is quiet. So it's like a pattern which comes day and night. It's another pattern. During daytime, certain kinds of thoughts will come to us. Nighttime, another kinds of thoughts will come. So nature has done this to create a certain kind of balance. The forces that act, they act in a certain measure. But with the coming of life, there is something else that happens, and we start breaking free from these habits of physical nature, but end up creating other habits, very often which are worse, because the vital nature is prone to desires. It is ignorant. So to ignorance, when we add desires, physical nature is ignorant and obscure. It doesn't know of any deeper, higher possibility. You tie things in a physical way, it will follow that pattern. To undo it is very difficult. That's why they say that what physical remembers, it remembers almost for lifelong. So you learn typing in a certain way, and if the keyboard changes, it's so difficult. That's why they keep standardized practice, it's very difficult. So even phone, I remember, now you start typing on phone, and you are given suggestions, and the habits when you write with the pen, it becomes a little difficult, because we are now getting used to language in a certain way. So there is this vital nature which create this problem. Then there is the mind, which can further fix limits by its ifs and buts and do's and don'ts, and tie us up further. Let's take a concrete example. In human beings, ordinarily, our body reacts automatically to certain pathogens. Let's take illness, for example. Take, for instance, alcohol. So people drink alcohol, they will vomit. You smoke, you'll cough. So body knows it's harmful. So this is, body has this instinct. Now if you lose this instinct, because the vital says, oh, it's cool to smoke. It's good. You must, what is wrong with drinking? I myself remember, I was brought up in a very strict, not strict that way, but a disciplined Brahmin family, where drinking was like as if you have fallen from the skies and gone down. And so I didn't drink, though I had it was based on later a conscious choice. And yet my teacher, good person, good human being. So I used to idolize him. All of us used to idolize him. Very nice person. Excellent doctor, nephrologist who would talk to patients. So everybody used to. But yet this, okay, शाम को 2 पेग चढ़ा लिया तो क्या हुआ? So, one of the evenings on a particular party day, he said, why you don't drink? What is there in taking 1 or 2 pegs? What is there? In army, everybody drinks. So I said, okay. Independent mind, liberated individuality. So I took 1 or 2 packs. For 2 months I was hooked up, because it went into the system in a very different way. It started rocking my system without realizing it. Knocking my system. So together, rocking and knocking the system. So now you see, the vital corrupted the natural instinct. The natural instinct was not to take it, and it was inbuilt. I was programmed like that. But when I broke the programming, it created a difficult situation, because now, that suddenly that lid was removed and the vulnerability came up. So normally, ordinarily, if left to the body itself, the body has the sure instinct of what we should do and not do. Often parents complain, my child doesn't eat, or it eats only this much. Of course, sometimes a very funny story, because somebody said, my child doesn't eat vegetables. So I took it this way, that the child is naturally not feeling the urge. So I said, children have a natural urge, so it's okay. Don't worry, they will let the child's instinct stay. So after 5-10 minutes of saying, he says, the child doesn't eat vegetables because we don't cook any. Because I said, now this is a complicated situation. I have no solution for that. So you have to cook and then try. So basically, that's how the physical consciousness operates, and the vital tends to corrupt. Mother says there are sure instincts in the body. Then to this, the mind comes, and mind comes with dogmas and beliefs. So, you have this idea that if you take this, you will fall sick. In so many times I have heard, एक खट्टा खा लिया है, दही खा लिया है, दूध पी लिया है, ये कर लिया है, वो कर लिया है. So I have to tell them, see, already life is pretty complicated. Don't complicate it more. It's okay. Some reasonableness is okay. But if you start eliminating everything from your diet, चीनी खाएगा तो डायबिटीज हो जाएगा, सॉल्ट खाएगा तो ब्लड प्रेशर हो जाएगा, खट्टा खाएगा तो गला खराब हो जाएगा. सो फिर खाएगा क्या, मतलब यू विल एंड अप विद eating a blind diet, and even that doesn't help, because you need a certain amount of salt, you need a certain amount of everything in the system. So mind comes with a strong dogmas and further binds us. So if we try to understand the formation of habit, it operates at 3 levels, and now we can go still deeper into it. The body with its obscurity, within which there is an instinct which operates normally. So in the obscurity of the body, nature has been very merciful, and intuition has come as instinct. The instinct is very sure sign. It operates. And that instinct operates in animal creation, plant creation wonderfully. Until human being eats the fruit of knowledge and corrupts that instinct. But at the same time, body is very obscure. So for preservation, it is the material. That's why we see form made of physical. It preserves. It will, the heartbeat, it is programmed, it will go on, genetically programmed to go on, God knows, till 70, 80 as per the average age in Kali Yuga. And then, of course, despite so much that we mistreat it, yet it continues like that. So it is a very helpful thing. Yet if the body has to evolve to some new capacity, is a very big burden, very big hurdle. Because in the body, when things get fixed, it is very, very difficult to undo it. That's what probably many people say, that it's very difficult to change things when the physical habits. But what we can do is to put in the right habits right from childhood. That was the whole idea of sanskaras. That right when a child is still growing, fix a little time, habits, patterns, time as a rhythm. So that's why to build patterns according to time, it works. It helps to have a certain fixed time for everything. But this fixity can take away plasticity. This is the big problem. But that's an evolutionary problem. We can talk about it later. Then the second knot, one is the body's knot of gross ignorance and unconsciousness. Consciousness is completely bound there. So whatever it has released and fixed a pattern, that pattern stays. And perhaps that's why once something gets settled in the physical, it's very, very difficult. And below the physical is the subconscious. That's where the real knot is tied. It's like somebody has tied things. That's why things which are rooted in the physical are very difficult to uproot. For instance, two things which are natural in, of course, in an average humanity, but we have to get past them as we, evolve further. Food, sleep, and sexuality. It's rooted so deeply in the physical, biologically. It's very difficult to uproot it because it's rooted in the very matter. And so it becomes very difficult. The moment matter changes into life, the first thing that appears is the capacity for reproduction. It could be asexual reproduction, but the tendency to extend itself. And that becomes very difficult because it's rooted in the very cells. Not just survival, but extension of your consciousness. It has many ramifications. So, vital nature operates by desires. And desires create patterns, habits. Another kind of habit. So, one is because of ignorance and obscurity of matter, where consciousness is completely lost. At the vital nature, where it's slightly liberated and it tries to break free from the physical, but it doesn't create something very great. Of course, very great considering matter which is completely tied. So there are possibilities which emerge, but they further tie us to our entire vital nature. And its movement, characteristic of vital nature is desire. And because of desire, certain action, reaction which follow. In human beings, it takes the typical pattern of running to satisfy a desire, and then a momentary pleasure, followed by the waning of the pleasure, followed by needing the pleasure again. So the desire once again pricks. You want your quota of joy. People call it joy, but pleasure. So you go. After some time, just like our Lakshmi, there is no pleasure. And still, the vital desire pushes us, goads us, pricks us. And habitually, mechanically, one gets bound. So this is the situation. And then it brings more and more frustration. All drug addicts, it ends up like this. Drugs, alcohol, initially it is a seeking for pleasure. So vital is seeking for pleasure. So for that, in ignorance, its movement is desire. So because of desire takes us to some momentary, immediately something which gives pleasure. So one repeats that thing again and again. And after some time, though it no more gives pleasure, yet one gets tired. Sri Ramakrishna used to give a very beautiful example that, this camel, it eats those little branches, twigs of trees which are very thorny. It hurts, it bleeds, but it eats. So it is something like that which happens to human beings. Desire, it is a very difficult groove to come out of it. Though it frees us to an extent from the total dull grey obscurity of matter, but it sets in another pattern which often blunts our instincts, at the same time becomes counterproductive. Then the third knot is the knot of the ego which comes with the mind. Viewpoints, dogmas, opinions, belief systems, all these, they further tie us. For instance, in an age, now in today's time, the belief is that if you are sick, consult a doctor. He may or may not be a healer, but a doctor who prescribes certain medicine. This belief that allopathic science, its way of study, is the ultimate truth. So the mind brings these dogmas, these beliefs. We saw its full and free play during the recent corona crisis. And then other higher possibilities are dulled. So the mind creates a further knot. So there is this story in the Vedas of this person called Sunship, who is tied by 3 knots. He is a being on the person who is put on stake as a sacrificial lamb. We don't even realize it, how these 3 knots tie us. So there is a knot which ties his head. It's the knot of the ego. And it is so stubborn. It is so stubborn that people, even when they realize that they are wrong, deep within, they will not let go of that opinion. They will hold on to it. Even when they are shown reasonably that, look here, this is your fixed opinion, belief, it's not supported by any rational argument, even forget about other things, they will still hold on to it. Why? Because this mine, my belief, my opinion, I'll hold on to it. So it is so stubborn and tight knot of the ego. That's why we see quarrels. People quarrel because they want to stand by this point and they are not able to see that there could be other ways of looking at it. There could be, if nothing else, try to find a synthesis. It requires a certain degree of evolution. And the result is that we get further bound. So habits of thought, opinions, beliefs are equally often more harmful because that is a master controller. So you see, left to animal, when they get hurt, what happens? They heal most of the time. And if they pass away far more gracefully than human beings do. They fall sick. They are, I've seen this, our favorite dog, poor Diana. So, she fell sick. Probably somebody had poisoned or whatever, most likely poisoned. And she had paralysis. She couldn't walk, tried everything. But I've seen till the end, her eyes had the same kind of kind, gentle look, which was so beautiful. To see those eyes, that sense of suffering that we would feel Eventually, somebody took her to the vet and she died there in the vet hospital, which was a sad thing. And, we wanted to give her a decent burial and all that, but I believe they do it in their own way. So, because the mind was not interfering, she didn't know these words that this is a paralysis, this is poisoning. So, her body was adjusting, but otherwise, she accepted this natural course and natural cycle. But our mind comes in and brings in completely new elements and binds us to things which need not bind us. And we hold on to these beliefs. Tell a doctor that, there are other ways of healing, medical doctor. They are very kind, gentle, nice people till you challenge their views. The moment you challenge the view, the ego of a professional is very hard, You can't, why a doctor, even half a doctor? You know or I know? So, I sit on this side of the fence. But I often felt like sitting on the other side and say, Doctor, it is my body. I know a little bit about my body. I'm supposed to know a little bit about my body. So, this is how the mind fixes us. So, Shunya shape is tied with one knot which is here, a tight knot. And what are these knots? Nothing but patterns. Nature put yourself in a groove and that's how it ties you. Same thing at the desire level, middle knot. Third is the knot of matter. And first knot is created by nature itself. The other two knots we create by our thoughts, feelings, actions. So that is called the knot of karma. Sounds very fantastic. But what is knot of karma? You do something few times, it becomes a pattern. And then nature has a tendency to put you back into that groove. I don't know whether, I'm sure some of us must have played Bagatelle. A very fascinating game. So you have to put these round little pellets into some holes where you ultimately get, right below is that 100 where you get maximum points. So it's an art to reach there because there are several and you have to do it just by this. Like carom if you have to do it. So initially it's very difficult. But after some time your body something happens and you learn that process. When you have learned that process, it becomes so easy to do it. And that's what, is all, a game is all about. So these are the three knots that tie us. And then the karma, repeat a thing repeatedly, it becomes a habit. This is a well-known thing. But what really is karma? Karma is not just an outer action. Outer action is supported by a certain vital energy and it is supported by a certain kind of mental thought. Let's take an example. If my mind believes that life is only for enjoyment, for sense pleasure, so there is this thought behind. So what I should normally do? I must live life just for the sake of seeking pleasure, very natural. So my mind is justified, my vital naturally seeks it because it looks up to the mind as master and the mind says, go ahead. There are kinds of philosophies that actually preaches this. And then the body is a poor instrument, it just, continues to act. So it's not the action, it's that force which is behind operating, which is what is the knot of karma. Sri Aurobindo reveals it very beautifully in Essays on the Gita. Action and events have no importance in themselves, but for the idea force that operates behind and the idea that the force is there to serve. It is so, when we go deep behind, we realize that what really binds us is the state of consciousness. It is that consciousness which operates in a certain way that our mind gets certain thoughts, our vital, seeks in certain ways, our physical body's instinct operate or don't operate. So at the end, we realize that it is the knot of consciousness, which actually is the root of all other things. And nature has tied this knot of consciousness very intelligently. But there is a way out of it to open these knots. And of course, these are the knots. If we go still deeper, we'll see all these chakras which we speak about in Kundalini. Basically, all the universal energies nature has fancifully, but with the wisdom, it has created patterns. And these patterns create what we call as the frontal individuality. And we believe this is me, and therefore I remain subject to what I believe myself to be. So this is my belief in my limitations that makes me what I am. So one of the first thing towards change is to change this orientation, to change this belief, to change this idea that ego is myself. That's why in all change, it will begin with this shift deep inside. So wherever we try to just manipulate things outwardly, it is a very, very temporary. Even if it remains for a long time, it is still very temporary, unless there is a shift inside. And the classical example is in military or police, you are trained. You are trained to be extremely disciplined. And one is disciplined. And yet in the war zone itself, you see, all soldiers all over the world are extremely trained and disciplined. Not just about, of course, Indian soldiers have certain Indian values, but still they are trained and disciplined. There are ethics, code, norms of the soldier. But see what happens to a soldier when in a war situation, suddenly your instincts can get let loose. Suddenly that same power that makes you conquer a battle begins to dominate, possess, and all kinds of evils can start. Simply because this training is purely at the outer level. There is no shift that has taken place in the consciousness. And I can give you one example which I felt so beautiful going to Gangtok. Those of us must have gone. If you go to Nathula Peak where there is Indo-Tibetan border. So Tibetan border is that side and there is the Indian border. And as you climb up, even in Ladakh there are places you find. As you climb up to the Indian post, I am not sure whether it has been done consciously or not, but something very beautiful is done. So you have several writings from the Gita, scriptural writing, very beautifully placed, very nicely, into a kind of board, and there, as you climb up, by the time you reach that peak, there is a shift inside, which is what is important. Otherwise, purely training and retraining, like behavioral people do, without change of consciousness, it will invariably, that energy, that consciousness which is still at the same level, will throw up the same pattern in another way. So, from a practical level, say in a disease situation, you have suppressed the disease or apparently controlled the symptoms. But what has happened? The consciousness is not changed. This is the real knot. If consciousness is not changed, the same little consciousness will push energy in a certain direction, certain ways, and it will impact the body, and you will see that the body is, another disease has appeared. Doesn't it happen? You control one, then another, and they are like clusters that come together. So therefore, if we really want to understand how habits form, we have to understand it on the basis of the consciousness. And it has its plus and minus. As I said, good and bad is a different thing. There are many good habits. And we can inculcate good habits. There's something wonderful. Good habits are not all bad. But it also means that any habit and every habit also ties us. Even a good habit ties us. Even a good habit of thought can tie us. I will never harm anyone, injure anyone. Karna, good habit. Every morning I'll get up. Whoever comes first, I will give him gift, generosity. So it's a good habit to give things, but it ties up. Therefore, we see in the Gita, when Sri Krishna speaks of freedom, he says going beyond the dualities of sin and virtue, good and evil, because then only you can be completely free. So to conclude, on one side, there is this entire material universe and the physical nature, which is tied by habit, and material nature has done an admirable job, even in the obscurity, when early humanity, which is closer to animal life of Tarzan, like that, if you see, these habits, they are counter-revolutionary. I mean, they fix you, but they are good things. But as nature allows a certain degree of freedom within limits, we see that these instincts are lost and we create new patterns. That's why the law of karma gets applied when mind and vital come into play, because we create new patterns. There is a certain degree of freedom. So what is the remedy? The remedy is not going back to the animal level of instincts. That's not possible. The remedy ultimately is to complete this evolutionary curve. Once we have taken the journey to be even as the gods, we must complete it. If we remain tied to our present animal human existence, we will probably tamper the surfaces. But because there is no radical change inside, we'll only shift the malady from one type to another. This is the larger picture. To summarize, three knots: physical, vital, and mental. Physical knot by sheer obscurity and unconsciousness, behind which a consciousness is acting. That's why you see, when in the material level, there are such wonderful instinctive things as habits. Then there is the vital knot, the knot of desire, and it keeps every living species running and chasing things, hunting for joy in the heart of pain, if you want to put it poetically. So it hunts for joy when it enters, and by the time it catches its slice of joy, it realizes it's in a heart of pain. But then it is in a situation where it can neither let go of the joy, because with great difficulty it has found its morsel, but at the same time, if it doesn't do that, it is locked in a heart of pain. That's also, there is a wisdom that operates behind it. And the third is the knot of the ego, where the mind divides, cuts things, fixes even of my own limits, my personality, and thereby it binds us to certain patterns and habits. To get free, we have to go beyond and behind. We have to unlock the doors through which nature has tied us, and we have to complete the evolutionary curve in which we are caught right now, midway. So, this is the overview of the knot of habits. If there are questions, most welcome. Namaste.
Namaste, Da. You mentioned about the vital desires. So my question is that sometimes when a vital desire comes, it camouflages itself very well. It is very deceptive, and also the mind also supports it in rationalizing it very beautifully. So in those moments, there is a part of me that has a doubt that this could be it, but then it is very overpowering, and I'm not able to maybe check it at a very early stage. So, what is, and then mind beautifully rationalizes it later. So, how to check it early and have enough willpower or convince myself better that why this is not right?
So it's a very beautiful question, except that you can replace the word sometimes with very often. And in most people, this is the difficulty. When in the initial stages, the mind is a slave of the vital desire. So most people actually do not even reach this point where you are trying to understand why the vital desire is there. Is it really desire or need? Even to distinguish or try to discern. Most human beings instinctively justify it. So the fact that you are trying to discern and discover, it's itself a very good sign that you have crossed that first step, which is the most difficult step. The second step is that how to know whether it's really a desire or it is something which is true, which is, it can be, for instance, a movement of the heart. There could be true love springing from the depths of the heart. And there could be a very surface emotion from the surface personality, where one has leaped at appearances and, feels one is in love. But it may be a purely surface, emotional vital, because here we see these two layers operate. There is the surface emotions, and there is the deeper heart of emotion. So how to know it is, first we should know it, recognize it. Now mind comes much later, justification comes much later, and we'll talk about it. But first is to know whatever causes restlessness is coming from the surface. In most human beings, the two are mixed. That makes it even more difficult. A movement from the depths get mixed on the surface, because it has to pass through the door. So even in a true movement, you will see that restlessness of desire gets mixed. So what we have to do, our job is, the mother said very interestingly, see, justification is a different process, but we can purify it, refine it, and we can extract that ingot of gold which is hidden behind every movement of nature, including desire. Behind desire also, there is an ingot of gold. Say, for instance, somebody is driven by ambition. It is obviously a very, in fact, it's as dangerous as lust. That's how Shobindra, the mother, put it. So, what is behind the movement of ambition? The behind the movement of ambition is to rise, have name and fame, in whatever area. Now, how to change it? Not that one gives up ambition, says, no, I'll not do. But one can change the urge or the ambition or the energy for ambition into the pursuit of excellence. Let me do better whatever I can do. And this better can take us right up to the spiritual perfection. Because to truly do a thing better, yoga, karma, sukha, aslam, one has to engage with yoga. So that's why in the Gita there is a very cryptic word, desire based on dharma. So there are desires which are, there's the second thing one can do is, one knows it is desire. One doesn't justify it. We don't have to justify, oh, it is something good. One knows it is desire, but one uses it for evolutionary purpose. Even that is possible. As the mother said, I give this example quite often because somebody told me directly that when a lady went and approached mother and said, Mother, what do I do when when love comes to me? She said, never, suppress the energy of love or destroy it, refine it and purify it. So meaning thereby there is the desire, but how to refine and purify it, that's the whole process we have to engage in. When we refine and start purifying, we may discover that it was nothing. It vanishes simply because it was a pure movement of desire. The moment you try refining, desire will refuse. It doesn't want. It wants its justification. It wants to do its own way. The moment you say, no, hold on, not your egoistic satisfaction. Let love remain and lust go away. You see, if it is pure desire just a movement of desire, it will drop away, wean off. Other way to wean it off is just hold, as I said, delay the gratification. That's another way. Because desires are like that. Any impulse, it goes like this. It reaches a peak when you have you are driven. But if you just allow, sometime it will wane off. That's how it works. But of course, if there is a habit, it will tend to stay longer or it will again and again come. But that's how desire operates. So one way is to learn to just step back. And I quite understand that will doesn't often operate. But as far as will is concerned, it only gets strengthened this way or the other way. Only by practicing. It's like muscles. So one can delay the gratification. I'm taking an example now of eating rasgulla. So you feel there is a greed for eating rasgulla. It's harmful. So delay, postpone it. And the postponement can be anything like immediately after food, no, I'll wait for half an hour, if possible. Then I'll eat little amount. So you are basically, every little training to the will is a welcome thing. And the second is that link the will constantly to the divine. So, Mother, I am not able to get rid of it. But one must sincerely try, not like... So one tries and then offers it, tries and offers it, tries and offers it. Several times one will see one has come out, but again one tends to fall. But that's how the journey is. So one has to first, step one, see whether there is restlessness in the being or not. That must be quietened. After quietening the restlessness, see what remains. If there is still a movement in a certain direction, it is not independent of the pleasure you may get from an object, then possibly you are touching the core of something true and beautiful. And then even there, one has to be very cautious. So any urge to gratify, it may veil itself under several disguises, as you rightly say, postpone it. When you postpone, time begins to reveal the truth of things. That's why we have this great, wonderful saying that Samay batayega, time will show. So that's why in olden times it used to be, don't rush, say with regard to marriage. And I do believe that nowadays children are wiser. It's not like parents, they fix kar diya, you get married. They date. Now I know I am saying something, even they live in few years, then they realize, no, this is not the choice I made. So okay, you have lost few years, you have gone through a difficult process, but you have learned and grown. But imagine you are stuck. Already there are 3 knots. Now you have tied a 7-fold knot of marriage. and you don't know what to do. You can't undo it. Imagine how risky the thing is. So it's always good to wait for time to reveal. If you can do it by, not taking that step beyond which it becomes very difficult to disengage, then it is better. And if you have taken that step, then go through the process, learn and grow. I remember Pranav Das said something very interesting to a girl who studied here, and she went through a lot of painful things with regard to her marriages. And she once told me, Pranav Da had told me. I said, what did he tell you? He said, I went and asked him that should I get married or not. He said, if you don't get married, it is best. Otherwise, you delay as much as you can. So don't rush into things. Just train the mind and the vital not to rush into things. That immediate rushing, if one can do that and take the help of grace, it takes time, but eventually it will settle down. One learns and grows by experience. That's how one knows that the mind was justifying it. Very nicely, neatly. It gives a cover. So always to remain open that there is a possibility, as you rightly said, maybe my mind is giving all the justifications. And that's how one grows. And finally, of course, the real answer lies in the psychic being, which alone can tell us whether this is a true movement or not. But till that happens, at least let the buddhi, the discerning intelligence, that remain active. It is like a sleepless vigil. And if you keep a vigil, you will see, very interestingly, you're feeling that no, this is something very divinely ordained. But if the vigil is there, you will pick up a movement, a sentence, and you will know that this is not it. You are caught. And even you may know that there is a mixture. And you will try to get rid of the mixture and keep the pure little drop of love with you. So one has to keep a vigil, not just completely lose hold. So people who have habitually learned to step back, to keep the buddhi active. So even when they are slipping in, they will pick up those signals that, well, this is it, this is not exactly how things should be, and they tend to change. It's a long process. The knot of desire is not so easy, but yes, with persistence. Some desires one can easily get rid of, but some are more difficult to get rid of. So one has to keep on practicing. With abhyas, the solution comes. Yes.
Does anyone else have a question?
I just have one more question. Alokta, do you think the physical nature is ultimately only controlled by habits, even though it could, even the higher, even if higher principles are operating in it, ultimately it is only going to be habits that will control the physical nature? Or can we imagine anything else for the physical?
So far it is controlled thus, as the Gita says, yantra rudini maya. It is driven as a fly caught on the wheel. That's how it is driven. And as I said, there is a reason why nature has done so. I am talking of the physical habits. Now, again, as I said, but there is nothing like a purely physical habit. Let's say, as Sri Aurobindo writes in one of his aphorisms, that the problem of, the difference between man and animal is that animals do certain things in season, but man does it in and out of season. Of course, he has said in context of even God makes the fool in season, but man plays the fool in and out of season. But it is so true. See, when animals eat, when animals mate, they are moved by instincts and they do it in season. And within that also there are checks and balances which are amazing. Like for instance, in lions, in elephants, why there is no incestuous mating? What blocks, let's say when a lion comes of age, 3 years, 4 years, is young adolescent, why doesn't he actually mate with his own mother? What prevents? We call it as an animal. There is a particular checks and balances within nature which operate. But with human beings, because the mind comes and desire comes, it breaks those things in the physical nature and brings it its own dogmatic things and its own desire, which creates more confusion. So ultimately, yes, the physical has a preserving tendency. And this preserving tendency is so strong that unless there is a very strong impulsion, as in human beings, especially with the mind, it remains where it is. And we can further strengthen it. But from the evolutionary point of view. Now, why I'm saying so is because what we call as physical habits in human beings, they are no more purely physical habits. Invariably, things have come in which have corrupted the file, even as a young child. So, the food we eat, it's already corrupted by the time we are 5, 6, 7. Ambition, already the seeds are sown. Though it looks like physical, sexual habits at a young age, now it's no more physical, but its roots are in the physical. So even when you throw it out from the mind and the vital, the physical roots are there, so they'll spring up again. And they will capture the vital and the mind again, because that's how the whole circuit works. So it becomes very difficult without a doubt. But the higher consciousness, that's what Sri Aurobindo says, can completely uproot it. And this is not only uproot, it can even transform it, because behind every movement, there is a secret truth. And this has been, not only my experience of many of us in different areas, that the higher consciousness is the consciousness of freedom. The higher we go, the more powerful, and the freedom is much more. It's like internet changes the way we operate life here. So the solution lies in tapping in the powers of the higher consciousness. That can change it. So on one side, till that happens, we can say that kutte ka pooch tedha nahi hota hai. But Vedantic thought cannot do it, because it gives you knowledge but not power. And that's why in Sri Aurobindo's yoga we have the Divine Mother. But the Divine Shakti can do it, because nature is emerged out of her. Nature is a frontal appearance. So the Divine Mother and her Shakti can do it. But purely that Vedantic knowledge, it cannot do it, because you need power to change an operation of nature. Knowledge can liberate us. It can say, I am not this, I am not this. It can weaken the knot, put it in its place, but it cannot overpower or change or master it. One needs Shakti for that. And even to receive Shakti is a preparation. Physical nature doesn't even receive Shakti. That's why the mother speaks about training the physical body, making the physical consciousness receptive. Even when the mind is open to the higher ranges, and the higher vital accepts. You see that first chapter of the mother. The lower vital and the physical and the subconscious still remain unchanged. So one has to work at this end also to make them more open and receptive. So it's a long process, no doubt. Nothing like French made easy, or Greek, translatable Greek. It takes time. But one has to follow that path if one is destined to do it, or one has the calling for it. Because every single person's victory will facilitate everybody else. It's like the 100th monkey principle. If each one conquers a habit within oneself, even a little, with the help of the higher consciousness, it will facilitate it in 50 others. So some are destined to do it, have the calling for it. So they would do it. Like in the laboratory, some people shut themselves up in the laboratory and want to work in, because it's not just an individual habit. It may look like individual. It's supported by the entire universal nature. You can't fight against it so easily. You throw it out, as Sri Aurobindo says, it goes in the subconscious or the environmental consciousness. It comes back again. But if one can win even this much dent, it helps everybody else. So here again, I take it like this, that there is a tipping point. Each individual who is engaged in yoga for a long time, you may see there is no breakthrough coming. And one day suddenly the iron wall collapses. She gives the example of that chick being formed inside the egg. For a long time, nothing is changing on the surface. But the chick is getting ready, and when it gets ready, feels stifled. Then one day the mother hen has to just do a little peck and it flies out. And each time an individual conquers a little thing, nature accepts the possibility. See, that's the other aspect. So nature says, okay, it is possible, I let it go. So it signs a document, okay, fine. Those who want to go this way, they can do it. You see, mother said something very interesting once, one of her experiences, that she saw a huge snake guarding the wealth which was captured by the asuras. And now we know, where all this wealth went. So she, so very interesting. She looks at the sea and sees, things which are coming from the subconscious, which is all. I don't want to make it so specific, What is it called? Black gold and things like that. Anyways, so she asks him that, this wealth is needed for divine purposes. He says, I won't give. I can give way to you, but the asuras, they will kill me. So she asked, what is the condition? She says, there is a condition with which you can get this wealth. So what is the condition? You can get it back from the asuras, provided there is a complete mastery of the sexual impulse. And then she says something very interesting. She says, I said, well, that condition is not easy because while individuals have conquered it, while it can be conquered, there are people who have conquered it. But he wanted in the large section of humanity. He says that has not yet been realized. When that happens, wealth will come automatically. Because wealth, sexuality, and lust for power, they are all interconnected. So each movement that we think is individual is supported by a universal plane. And that takes us to the cosmic dimension of these habits. It's not just my desire and your desire. Behind desire, there is a whole energy which is operating in the universe. So cosmic powers which help and hinder, so that's a different story altogether. Like in Suna Shape story, it is God Varuna who releases the three knots. Vastness. That's why human life is a battle. And we have two options. One is to say, okay, I'll remain where I am. Life remains how it is. That's not a good option to be a slave. And the other is I'll strive for freedom, whatever time it takes. And knowing very well that maybe others are not doing it, but my little step towards freedom will free many others. So these are the two options one can choose.
Thank you, Doc.